Good evening, everyone, and thank you for listening to the Futurati Podcast, where we dive into how emerging technologies will impact the world and your bank account. I'm Trent Fowler, and joining me, as always, is my co-host, Thomas Fry. Thomas and I are futurists, keynote speakers, and consultants with decades of experience in analyzing new trends and communicating new developments to audiences across the world. Reach out to us at futuratipodcast.com/contact-futurati if you'd like to hire us for consulting, to speak at an event, or to advertise on our podcast. So, Thomas, we just spoke with James Norris. He's actually somebody I've known for a really long time through his work on agency and growth. So I am familiar with his company, Upgradable. They do bespoke, tailored plans for helping a person become as Elon Musky as they can possibly be. So I've known him for a while. I actually didn't know he was as involved in existential risk and effective altruism as he is, but it was great talking to him. What stood out to you from the conversation?
Well, he does not have the most optimistic view of what's going to happen in the future.
No.
Some would call him a fatalist. And I think the options available to people are far greater than he. He's focused on just all the things that can go wrong. And I don't know, I tend to look at the things that go right, which I look at the other side of the equation. So, but it's interesting having a person like that kind of step through their mindset and how they got to where they're at today. So I think it's definitely worthwhile for people to listen to this and understand what's kind of the makeup of this type of an equation that goes through a person's mind.
Yeah, so the interview was divided roughly into, the first part was focused on self-improvement and agency. We talked a lot about the roadblocks that get in the way of personal growth, and it was kind of self-helpy almost at the beginning of it. It's like self-help for people who are good at math. You could think of it that way. And then we got into existential risk, and I wanted us to finish on a positive note. So we talked about existential hope and all the ways in which the world can get better. So hopefully it's not too much of a downer. I mean, he did say that we don't have that long before we kill ourselves with artificial general intelligence. So, there's that. But otherwise, otherwise, I thought there was a lot in the interview that was hopeful and a lot of hopefully actionable advice for anybody who's looking for it. So with that in mind, we encourage you to listen to this interview with James Norris. Let us know what you think and live your best life. Tonight, we're joined by James Norris. All his life, James has been searching for the best ways to change himself and the world. He started as an entrepreneur at the age of 6 and since has co-founded or helped build 9 businesses and 16 organizations, including the Global Conference Series for the Effective Altruism Movement, the world's first global life-hacking event series, Southeast Asia's first social innovation hackathon series, and a university for today's Leonardo da Vincis. He graduated from the University of Texas at Austin as a, get this, triple major, quadruple minor. He spent 20 plus years unsystematically upgrading himself. If you enjoyed this interview, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. And don't forget to check out our website, futuratipodcast.com. James, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Happy to be here, Trent.
Let's hear a little bit about your background, your interests, and what brought you to working on the problems that you're working on today.
Short version, just a nerd from Houston, Texas that got into sci-fi pretty early. So most of my life's work is around behavior change and social change. I've been trying to create what we could cheekily call like wise Elon Musks for a long time now, or folks who are as agentic as Elon and as wise as the Dalai Lama. That's the really short version. And somewhat successful, somewhat failure. But my whole life has been around building social enterprises, nonprofits, trying to create these agentic type of folks that can go and see the future and shape it. So the future is inside is a big part of it. And all of these folks have multi-year, multi-decade type of life plans and life strategies, and that's what we work with. So I could get into more detail, but yeah, I've built 25 organizations. They've been running for 200 plus years now collectively. None of the really breakouts, but they're still going. So about half of them are. And I have a pretty autodidactic background. I was a triple major, quadruple minor in college. And I tried to build a university for today's Da Vinci's. It's one of the organizations. And yeah, all this led me to here we are at the future. So when I was young, I thought, well, when I hit my 40s or so, it'd be the turning point for civilization. And here we are. And it looks like it looks like literally we're on the precipice of extraordinary change. And that's exciting and terrifying at the same time.
So I've established a new goal for myself. I want to become the oldest person ever to achieve unicorn status. And what's kind of interesting is that I asked ChatGPT who the oldest unicorn person was, and this actually in their 30s, and I thought, wow, I had no clue.
That's the oldest That's the oldest anyone's ever been when they became a billionaire, was in their 30s.
According to ChatGPT. Now I have no good way of validating that. I don't know.
That's insane. That's wow. Yeah, I would want to double check that. That was
sounds like younger.
Yeah.
Well, we can say Sam Bankman-Fried was one of the youngest, sort of self-made billionaires. He's one of the effective altruists that went astray. But designing and creating billionaires is like one of the things that we try to do with Upgradable, my social enterprise. But there's some caveats there, because with power and success, sometimes you also fall apart. We can talk about Elon. But
what I've done is I've established that there is an opening.
All right.
Well, I could become that person.
Here's your Thomas.
Yeah.
I was thinking maybe you were trying to be a proper unicorn. So with genetic engineering, maybe become the first human unicorn. That's my original thought, because we are, futurists living in the future, right? But
into a really weird place right off the bat. That's our favorite kind of guest. So I wanted to start. You mentioned several things that I find really fascinating: personal and social change, building people as agentic as Elon. Could you tell me a little bit about? So I guess you can take them in whichever order you want, but I'm very interested in models of social change, how societies change. We interviewed Samuel Bourdieu about exactly this subject about a year or so ago. And then, how you think about agency, how you think about instilling agency. This is also something I've kind of become fascinated by. So you can take those and however you want.
How long do you got?
40 minutes.
Yeah. Compressing all of social change into a few minutes is folly, but let's try anyway. I studied this in university, and I've been studying it ever since. Let's take it from an individual perspective. If you're trying to change the world, trying to do large-scale systemic change, you have to first understand it's a complex adaptive system. You intervene in one point, in one city, one country, one industry, one field. You expect some outcome because you model that XYZ. You invent something that makes the world better, but then downstream effects, second order effects. So first thing up is it's much more complex than your puny little brain can actually handle. So humility really, really, really matters when it comes to doing this sort of thing. And I find a lot of folks that have come before in trying to change the world didn't show appropriate humility and intellectual humility. That said, we might have to push hard anyway, because we're at that precipice, as I said. There are formal theories. I don't think any of them, I studied them. I don't know if they actually inform much of what I would do now or recommend people do now. Because as an individual, again, do you choose to become the world's best at XYZ, electric cars? Or do you choose to become the world's best at AI safety in sub-area 1, right? Or do you try to go into government and policy and become prime minister or president or somewhere in high level, like a research institution? Those are a bunch of different approaches that you might think about taking to actually enact change, but that's an individual perspective. Collectively, this is you, me, Thomas, and thousands and millions of billions of other people. So this really interesting organic organism that is civilization is going to keep on adapting and evolving regardless of what you do as an individual agent. So I try to look at that scale, but I don't know how to besides a few things like trying to build movements, that's one of the bigger scale things that you might consider doing. So we helped build the effective altruism movement. We can get into that if you want. That was an intentional effort to shape society, to shape the future. And it obviously backfired to some extent recently.
Hello, this is Trent Fowler, co-host of the Futurati podcast. One of the most common pieces of marketing advice I've come across is to know your audience and give them what they want. One difficulty in podcasting is that it's actually pretty hard to do this. None of the major platforms give us any way to reach out to you, our listeners, to find out what you enjoy about the Futurati podcast and what you'd like to see done differently. So we've decided to record this commercial and ask you directly to reach out to us. Head over to futuratipodcast.com, go to the contact page, and drop us a line. Tell us about your favorite and least favorite episodes, what you'd like to see us cover in the future, and anything else you want us to know. We produce this show for you, and we want your advice so we can make it even better. Thank you.
Well, it seems that if you surround yourself with people who are like-minded change agents, that the propensity for actually affecting a good change might be greater than it seems like the people you hang out with have just a huge amount of influence on where you end up in life.
Yeah, good research on that as a developmental psychology. So a lot of the adolescents, like you as parents, think you're actually crafting or cultivating or analyzing your kids. To a large extent, it's their peer group and the culture that they're in. So maybe that's positive or negative. But yeah, I agree. So to actually do this sort of system level change, if you're doing it on your own, a lone inventor in the woods somewhere, I've done a bit of that. It's hard, it's stressful, and you kind of lose your way often. But if you do it in a group, as a community, a small co-living house, or you do it in a city that's like Silicon Valley style, or you're doing it in a broad community like effective altruism or futurism, that gives you a lot of benefit of the other, because many of them have similar views, but many of them also disagree with you, want to cut you down, fundamentally think that you might be causing destruction, not enlightenment or flourishing. And also there's plain old jealousy and things like that. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. However, I just recommend folks get it in a small group, the folks that are very highly aligned to their values and their life strategies, and teach them about you. You teach them about each other. So you have that sort of tribe mentality. Insofar as you can be honest about, like, hey, I don't think your approach will work, or I think your approach will work. So that deep level epistemic connection. So pushing back hard on what they believe and what they don't believe. If you can do that and you have love and respect and compassion in that community, great, that's fantastic. But I don't think you going into hardcore sort of military style intensity is usually the best way if you're an individual change agent trying to do the most amount of good. Others history.
So when I asked about agents, like I'm hoping to get a little bit into the nuts and bolts. So you have presumably studied agentic people and have worked with people who are high agency to get them, even higher agency and more effective in whatever it is they're trying to accomplish. What do you see holding people back? What are the strategies you recommend for a person who just wants to get more done and wants to affect more change?
Yeah, we've looked at this for 20 plus years now, and we compressed everything we learned into upgradable.org/learn insofar as you can. So we tried to codify the most useful concepts, principles, and strategies and tactics and tools for upgrading yourself. So that's free. You can go check it out.
And that's upgradable.org/learn. If the audio didn't come, upgradable.org/learn. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, please continue. I'm sorry.
It's meant to be sort of an encyclopedia of the most useful concepts and principles and so on for becoming more agentic. When you do this in an individual level or at a group, this is like an N1 experiment, because no one has figured out how to actually upgrade people efficiently and effectively. So this is a research effort. I think millions of people have tried, many millions of people have tried to become very successful, very famous or rich or happy, whatever your ultimate terminal goals are. Most people fail. So we should fundamentally realize that the vast majority of people in the world don't achieve anything close to their optimal life. And we define human flourishing as just living the life that you most want to live given your values. So if you truly value peace and you have to struggle every day, you're not there yet. And if you value safety and you live in the world today, then you're not there yet because the world is very unsafe. And if you value freedom, well, if you have enough resources, perhaps you can do it. Some people have achieved that. But I think you asked about some things that hold people back. Classically, you hold yourself back. So I hold myself back. There's a lot of psychological demons, if you will, that are, you can use the parts model. So internal family systems therapy is a useful framing here. One side of you, one part of you is fighting the other part of you. It's like a tug of war inside your brain. So that happens all the time with most people that I worked with. They don't necessarily know that this war is going on. They don't see that the term we coin is systemic stuckness. At a system level, the individual is unable to stop smoking, for example, because they actually need it for stress reduction. And until they can get another avenue for stress reduction, they won't stop the smoking. Therefore, they're likely to get cancer. This happened to my mom. A lot of my work is motivated by her because she died when she was 16 from lung cancer because she smoked for decades. And she could not escape that, not easily. So we designed upgrade program to try to get people like her out of that systemic stuckness. So if you're doing intervention with someone like that, they need help. They need money to tide over the short-term financial complications. They need some inspiration and hope and guidance around choosing better careers. They need some probably therapy to help them get out of dysfunctional relationships, marriage. And they need all this all at once at a system level. Otherwise, a change does not occur. So broadly speaking, there's no real easy heuristics on how to do this. It's always one adapting off of what you see and what you come across with the people that you're working with. So you, Trent, and Thomas, me, we all have our own different story about why we're stuck, why we're not actually achieving near that optimal. And we could diagnose if you wanted and go into it. And it's not that complicated to figure out the conceptual level. The harder level is actually the execution. So how you do the change over days, weeks, months, years, decades to actually achieve the things that are most valuable to you. Our brains are not wired for that. We're not evolved to do that. So it's not something that you're naturally going to be very good at.
So I played around with this. This will sound insane on a lot of levels, but this idea of doing a reality TV show where you go into the inner city of Chicago and you kidnap gang members and then transport them to northern Canada and drop them off and let them try to survive. I admit this is totally insane, but the idea of trying to effect change in a person. Am I on the right track there? Probably.
We're going to kidnap gang members. I'm going to stop you right there, Thomas.
But it would be a reality TV show and they'd get paid for it if they did write videos.
Yeah.
There's something there in the research literature, Thomas, like if you shift someone from poverty to a healthier environment, often they do better. And we've seen that over and over again. So I am a fan of these sort of interventions with consent, and with fair distribution. So why is it my other friend in the gang gets to go up to northern Canada, be dropped in a survival situation, and I don't, right? There's a program called KIP. The actual, what it stands for, Kids in Program School, something. It's one of the most famous chartered school setups. I went and visited it when I was back in Houston, where I'm from, relatively recently, just to see the school. It's pretty cool, but they design it much more like a rigorous sort of not a military setup, but they design the gamification pretty clearly. You get rewards for this, you get punishments for this. Everything is high standards. You can do it, push, but with love. So it's not quite I lived in Singapore too. It's not quite that draconian intense. A lot of the kids in Singapore who go through intense training from very young, they tend to suffer. I think KIP does a little better job as far as I can tell, but it's really hard to get into. It's a lottery system. So these are the kind of social enterprises that have some traction. But Now, how do we scale that? Fortunately or unfortunately, with narrow AI, we can start to do these sort of educational interventions per person in a one adaptive fairly soon. And that will fundamentally reshape society. So I look forward to that side of the future.
So we should be asking, how would Mr. Beast do this?
I kidnapped 300 gang members from inner Chicago and put them in northern Canada.
Help with ratings, yeah.
That would help.
He hasn't done that.
It's not enough time, I guess. Yeah. I had a follow-up question building on what you said, but I can't recall what it is now. Let's talk a little bit about metagrowth or recursive self-improvement. This is something that I also find quite fascinating, and it seems like it would tie into the agency angle that we've been pursuing this whole time. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, our term for it is metagrowth. So growing your ability to grow. So we think it's recursive. So the classic example is, if you make money, then you can use money to make money for you. Simple. Then you can use the money to make more money and use money to make more money. It's not like an exponential per se, but it's not necessarily linear. Brand works like this too. So sometimes you can get a little famous and you can get more famous and more famous. By the way, when you become famous, there's downsides. So it's not all what it's cracked up to be. I've been out limelight for a long time for this very reason, but now here I am again. So these are two examples. It's anything that has greater and greater impact on your overall goal attainment. Going to the gym is not metagrowth per se. A little bit of it. You go every day, you have linear gains, and at some point you cap. So it's still useful to do. It's helpful, but you are bounded to a large extent. So the thing that we would love to do in humans is recursively self-improve to the point that we're full agents, able to enact change in the world such that our values are propagated. So rearrange the atoms in the universe such that, hey, my environment looks really good. The person next to me, my loved one, is really amazing. We fit. Or you are a cyborg or a starship or some version of a future self that you might want to be. So that's what I mean by when you go down to optimal life, there are all the way up to an optimal life that has very different meanings for different people. So by setting growth, you can do all the basic stuff. You can self-develop for decades. I have, many of my clients have, many of my friends have, and you still get to capped limits. So I look at Elon as a paragon of many good things, but some not so great. So you can imagine that might be near a cap or some version of a cap, that much money, that much influence. However, it's about to change because now you can possibly have AI agents that are smarter than him, John von Neumann level agents that maybe there's millions or billions or trillions of them working in tandem to help you grow. You don't need that much per se because you're relatively simple compared to society, but it's up to, the challenge from an individual behavior change because it's easier to model, easier to make progress on. So you can help heads of state, CEOs, celebrities, and so on make some change in their life. But the bigger question is, what do we do with this 8 billion of us and then trillions or quadrillions of other life forms on the planet that they all first presumably ought to be able to grow to their ultimate state as well. So this is all open research question, Trent. I'm not exactly sure what it'll look like even in a year from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now. What it means to be this fully evolved human is just sky's the limit. It's hard to anticipate.
What are some of the levers that a person can pull for getting traction in this metagrowth process? So, I think fame and money are two kind of obvious examples. Are there any others? I first became interested in this when I was probably 12 or 13, and I didn't know the word metacognition, but I knew that you could think about thinking, and if you could design a better way to think, then even if it were only 1% better, that would put you on a totally different trajectory over the course of your life. So I've always been fascinated by that. It consciously directed interventions into the flow of your own experience or the way that you process information. So do you have anything that's maybe more tactical? Obviously I could make $1 million and turn that into 10 million trivially, obviously. But I'm curious as to, if I just stand up from the desk now, what could I do to improve the way that I think to kickstart this process of growing my capacity to grow? The
short answer is do an upgrade program, and that you decide and you choose the path forward. You can do
You pay me. You pay me.
Well, you can, but you could do it on your own. Like, we've made it free to a large extent. So that's the aim. Like, everyone's doing some version of this already, but we're trying to intentionally have you be more strategic and more systematic. So the thing that I usually get people to start with is building your exocortex, your external brain. Most people are already cyborgs. They already have phones. They have these supercomputers in their pocket, and they don't quite realize it. They've already adapted to that. But most people don't have a very clean desktop on their laptop or on their phone or on their drives, Google Drive or Dropbox, and on their email inboxes and their other systems. So all that is your exocortex. That's how you think through distributed cognition. You also can think through other people, so your personal team. We'll get to that in a second. But the easiest thing to consider doing is cleaning up your entire exocortex so that you know where every single thing goes. Every single idea you have has a spot. Every single action you have has a spot. Every single part of your resources has a spot. So your money, your time, your calendars, and so on. All that together gives you a greater sense of agency because you don't forget things and you're able to do more. And it helps you get smarter and more effective every single day. Because what you do when you start getting clear on your tasks and your highest value tasks, if you actually try to rank them and then actually see if you're doing them, you realize you're not. Most people are not living like in a smart, rational type of way every single day. So if I ask you what the most important thing is for you to do today, Trent, it might be talking to me, but it might be applying to something. It might be ending a really bad relationship. It might be moving to a safer, more fun location. It might be getting that 43-inch monitor. I'm not really sure. But there are many different things you can consider doing. If they're not on your digital substrate, your digital mind, and they're not in a ranked way, you don't really have much chance of doing it. So most people just go through life winging it, figuring things out. They're overwhelmed. So I encourage first exocortex, getting clear. Inbox zero or inbox zen is the term we use. So everything is back to a relatively good state, and then you can be more strategic and choose the highest value thing every single moment, every single day, every week, every month, every quarter, every year. You need to keep on going back to that over and over again because your brain is not really good at thinking about this stuff and keeping it, containing it. David Allen, famously talks about the brain is good for having ideas, but not for keeping them. I worked with some of his family relatively recently, which is kind of a hoot. They're all interesting characters. But speaking,
I didn't hear the
David Allen getting things done fame.
Oh yes.
The old school. So most people don't have a GTD system or equivalent. So all that's kind of common sense. But if you actually do it, you're much more able to act fluidly and strategically towards what's most important for you.
So what do you see as the big technologies coming down the pike that are going to dramatically shift gears for us? And I think in these terms that the technologies that are most likely to take your job away is the one that's going to create the new jobs of the future. And so it would seem like we're paying attention to all the new tech that's coming down the pike here, that there's going to be, that we can align ourselves with a lot of the change that's happening over the next 10, 20 years. Maybe that's not a good way of phrasing that, though.
And I would shorten timelines. I think it's about 1 to 4 years for change. I'm not completely certain on that, but high confidence. And you alluded to creating new jobs. Yeah. Elephant in the room is AI. So HI, human intelligence, has been dramatically powerful. We've used it to go to the moon. We've used it to create higher qualities of life for a large swath of the population. So I think AI is substantially more powerful by its inherent design. So I think it will take a lot of jobs, and it will create new jobs that it also takes. So I don't really see much of a future for humanity on its current course. I've been X-Risk since I was 15. I built my first proto existential risk organization, trying to design international space settlements in Mars and other places for this international competition that NASA had done. And that sparked me. Like, yeah, we really ought to get off this planet, and we really ought to try to be more prepared for the moment we're at, which is probably now. As AI comes, I suspect it disrupts the vast majority of what we consider human. And the most likely scenario, if I'm just being completely honest, is extinction. And I believe you've had guests that talk about this before, but I don't really see that much of a positive outcome if we continue building AI or AGI as we are now. Much more likely we actually just accidentally or intentionally kill ourselves. So the biggest technology is AI, and that's the last invention that we ever have to invent, because it can invent everything else after that at a speed that we can't fathom. So any futurist that is worth their salt has been thinking about the singularity for decades, and it seems like my original estimate, my prediction in 2008 was 2028. So it looks like I'm relatively on for that one. But I'm happy that some of mine were wrong. So of that same set from 2008, about 66% seem to be on and 33 are off. So I'm really, really hoping I'm off on this one. It's one of the biggest sources of hope for me is that I could be wrong. And Eliezer could be wrong. This whole AI safety field could be wrong. But I would not bet on it. So that's where we're at. I'm working my ass off to an extent to try to prevent this catastrophe. And I have for a long time. So I helped early days of effective altruism. I co-founded EA Global and EA Ventures and advised 80,000 hours, which they were all trying to help to some extent build the AI safety movement, which we have now. So I'm very happy that the UN finally acknowledged AI as an existential risk last year, and they've been trying to push a little bit on it. And there's so many new institutions and organizations and people joining the fight, and that's inspiring to me. But we got to do it, Thomas. We got to actually figure out how to align AI or stop it completely. Otherwise, it will likely supersede us.
Are you enjoying this episode of the Futurati podcast? If so, please like it, give the show a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and share it with your friends. By far, the best way to help us grow is to spread the word on social media, which will expose our content to more people and help us continue to bring you interviews with world-leading experts in AI, quantum computing, cryptocurrencies, and so much more. Thank you in advance.
So today we're 4 years away from that. We're 4 years away from the current approach to artificial intelligence, deep learning, large language models. That's going to yield an AGI that recursively self-improves and leaves humanity behind.
My estimate 1 to 4 is disruption. So civilizational disruption and then civilizational collapse and then extinction. There are different predictions for each one. I don't like putting numbers on it per se, but I do it for clarity. These things change when you make predictions based off of the reactions you see in the world. So if we actually get really good regulation in play, we might have much longer. The current estimates are based off what I see now. And one is almost 20 years old now, the AGI estimate. And that was always an assumption that if we build it, then we will likely not survive it. Although back then I was much more optimistic about it having inherent values that might be aligned towards ours, or some version of ethics being embedded in intelligence. But I no longer believe that. So it was a fairly big shift. It's the same thing when you're a techno-utopian optimist. You think technology will save everything, do all this amazing goodness, and then you realize the downside of it. It's that naive optimism turns into more of a somber realism. Oh, well, yeah, there's a lot of fantastic value in connecting on social media, but there's also disruption inherent in this, and then it propagates mind viruses. And that's the kind of state that we're living in with AI too. So insofar as it's great, it has all this massive upside, which we want to help educate people. We want to cure cancer and solve poverty. But presumably these sort of technologies can do it, because it's not just 8 billion of us, it's now trillions of us or trillions of them trying to solve these problems. But the downside is there's also trillions of them this alien superintelligence that plausibly is not aligned with our values whatsoever. There's no real reason inherent in the physics of it, the philosophy of it, why these sort of intelligences would actually be aligned to what we value. Because even amongst the 8 billion of us, we're not aligned. You just look at Ukraine and Russia right now. They're not quite aligned on their values. And much of the world is like that.
So what kind of regulations are you thinking in terms of what would help? Yeah, what would help?
Yeah, our best hope is a UN that works. So I'm researching right now a UN 2.0 type of initiative if we can catalyze such a global government. Obviously, there are downsides there, but the upside is we have a better chance of surviving. So I would like to see all frontier development stopped until we can provably show it's safe to build. If that takes 10 years, great. 25, great. 100, great. It doesn't matter how long it takes, because you should never gamble with existence. So the entrepreneurs, innovators out there, I know don't want to hear this, but if you're potentially creating something that's world ending, I believe you ought to stop. I don't think you have the right to put me and everyone else at risk. So I think that that's fairly common sense. Something like 70+% of Americans want international regulations and more regulations. Something like 60-70% are pretty scared. So if you're doing something that's scaring your neighbors and your family, and those of us who are in the field that study this, you should really consider what you're doing. I'd say the same thing if you're trying to build a new type of nuclear weapon that doesn't require uranium or plutonium. So that's also incredibly dangerous. We've almost destroyed ourselves many times over the last few decades. J.D. Khrushchev, his estimate during the Cold War was something like 33 to 50% odds that we would kill ourselves. So it came very close, coin flip, to destroying humanity. And that was with a relatively contained weapon system. So AIs are not contained, and that they, in the future, probably can run on the phone. And how do you actually align those AIs with human values, which change? So it's just a very different game to be playing. And I think the world is waking up now. This is what's exciting to me. It's really hard to stomach this. We have so many biases, the normalcy bias, for example, bias. You don't want to think about downside risks or change because it's cognitively taxing. It's painful. Our brains are not designed for truth seeking. They're designed to help you procreate. And so you don't need to know about these big existential risks if your focus is on your family, raising children. Your mind is not designed for it. So it's understandable, but people don't get it and they don't really focus on it. It's depressing, it's painful, but it's the same story, although much more dangerous than with atomic weapons. So when Szilard and Einstein and others realized the potential destruction they were about to wield, some of them took it extremely seriously, trying to petition to hide the research and hide the patents and slow down and build international cooperation. And some were not. They were more cavalier. But we got through it by sheer luck and a lot of people fighting really hard. So I'm hoping we do the same. I'm hoping we use narrow AI, carefully designed, carefully propagated AI that does good, and do not build AGI until we can provably ensure it's going to be safe and aligned. So get 90 to 99% of scientists and philosophers who study this to agree, and then maybe we do experiments. Until then, don't experiment. We need a world government to help ensure that happens. So I'm working on that, working on Quadruple to help people see and shape the future, working on a bunker project, trying to help people build off-grid villas and bunkers, because I don't necessarily think we're going to do it in time. So maybe some of us can survive. But yeah, that's the sober reality we're in. And if you don't believe it, that's okay. But study art and try to get good arguments for why that we might be wrong on the AI safety side. And if you can, fantastic, convince us, because then I could sleep really, really well tonight. But I'm yet to have anyone convince me or do anything really compelling In fact, it's the opposite. Every time I talk to someone, they become more pessimistic and they see the risks more. And I've almost never seen people expand their timelines and say, okay, it's going to happen, 2100, but then it's going to be 2200. No, it's always shortening. And the danger is going up. So that tells you a lot, and that more consensus is coming, and we're at that breaking point at the moment. So we might be able to do some regulation. The AI EU Act passed, and there's some executive orders in the US, and there's a bunch of other approaches. The more we get that help with this, the more we can slow it down and maybe try to guide it and shepherd our future. So, sorry for bringing that. But
No. Yeah, no, I appreciate you just facing the truth head on as you see it and leveling with us. In terms of counter arguments, I would check out episode 157 with Greg Salmieri and episode 156 with Johannes Jaeger, both people who are, experts, not necessarily in artificial intelligence per se, but in related philosophical disciplines. And we spent quite a while with both of them sort of picking their brains. And I don't think that the result amounts to anything like a full refutation of all the Yudkowskian arguments. I mean, they just go on and on and on, right? But it's definitely an alternative perspective that I think is at least compelling and which is far more optimistic. So I would check those two out. And I wanted to end on a happier note by asking you about existential hope. That's one you don't hear as much about. You hear a lot about existential risk. You don't hear as much about existential hope. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, this was coined, I think, from Allison at Foresight Institute. And it was the most obvious thing that we're trying to build utopia, or utopias, right? The whole point of this endeavor to evolve our species is to make it such that life is extraordinarily good. So I think technology has always had that potential to do that. And as I said, narrow AI with education, curing diseases, that sounds fantastic to me. But big picture, I think that we should hope to not be a single planetary species. I think we should be multiplanetary, and we should be not just carbon-based, but we can be silicon-based or other substrates. So, well, I think the best take I've seen on existential hope and these utopian type of futures is from Max Tegmark's book, Life 3.0. So he actually surveyed a lot of people to see what they wanted in this future. Imagine we could have anything. And he had a bunch of different versions, like I was like 12, some dystopian, like Extinction in like 1984, but some were like libertarian utopia or benevolent dictator kind of version. So I do imagine a future where we get this right and we do get to solve most of the world's problems, if not all of them. So if you can dream, big and think big, think astronomical, then you can start thinking about you as, or your successor being in a much different state of being. Hedonium shock wave is a term sometimes used. Pure bliss propagating out at the speed of light. We don't really know what happens here, but I don't think we're going to be in this state of 190 countries, often warring with each other, dying at age 79 on average, and like most of us not living great lives. I think that's just a transitionary point. So let's say we solve AI alignment, AGI alignment. We use that trillions of new minds to help solve everything, build new technologies, cursively self-improve. If we can do that well, which is hard, I don't think we should try right now. I think we should wise up before we try. But if we do eventually get there, then we become some fantastically optimistic, beautiful, post-human species. That's what I look forward to.
But you said we should wise up before we try. What does that wising up look like?
Don't gamble with existence. If you're building something that might destroy all of humanity, stop. That's pretty much it. If you're trying to, you're building a company that like makes tables and chairs, you're not likely going to destroy humanity. If you're building a company that addicts kids to vaping or cigarettes, that's pretty bad, but that's also not going to kill humanity. If you're building something that is on the order of an alien superintelligence that may or may not have our values, and there's really no theoretical way that we can control it or align it, that's pretty bad. So have some prudence, have some humility and some compassion for all of us who don't want to go into that future, because we can't, it's hard to stop you, but people will try to stop you if you're doing that. So I suspect the future, like the next few years, people start to wise up around the risks, and they get really upset when people are trying to gamble with their future. So that's how I see it. Could be wrong. But.
Do you need a dynamic and knowledgeable speaker for an event? Thomas Fry and me, Trent Fowler, are both seasoned keynote speakers, able to converse on a wide array of topics to audiences of all sizes and skill levels. Go to the contact page at futuratiepodcast.com to book Thomas or myself today, and let us apply our years of experience in public speaking to make your event a smashing success.
Would you consider quantum computing an exponential risk?
You know, I actually worked with one of the leaders in the field and tried to ask about some of this stuff, and he said, "Hey, we're not there yet." I don't know. I wouldn't classify it as an X risk yet, but I do suspect it transforms much of our security systems, and what we consider normal will not survive that sort of transition if we invent that.
Okay, so what advice would you give a person listening to this podcast who's maybe on the younger side, let's say not 30 yet, relatively bright, some technical skills, could plausibly make an impact in one direction or another? Where would you recommend they allocate their time?
Yeah, if you've got time and energy, your money, put it into AI safety. AIsafety.com is the new entry point. Upgradable.org, we also have done this for years, helping people plan their entire life path given AI and other technologies. And there's many dozens of other organizations now that are eager to bring people into the fold and help them get situated and do useful work. So yeah, the career is the best thing. If you can put time into it, switch careers. If you can put money into it, just make donations or investments. If you can lobby your Congress people, absolutely do that. If you can sign open letters, absolutely do that. If you can join protests, law of AI, for example, absolutely do that. If it works given your existing values and constraints. Obviously, if you're a very high-level CEO, you're probably not going to be doing a protest. It may work for you, may not. So all these things take a lot of thought and consideration, but there's a lot of things that people can do. The very simple thing is talk to your neighbors, your friends, and your family, and help them see these risks, help them come to terms with it. You can always improve yourself at the individual level, like your own health and well-being, your own preparedness. You can plan for that bunker. You can become more skilled in general. The more agentic you are and able to adapt and do what's needed on a day-to-day basis, the better you are prepared for these kind of futures. And that's all upside, mostly. So even if I'm wrong, AI doesn't actually come and does much in normal life. Still, it behooves you to try to improve your agency and your well-being. So that's pretty obvious. And that wins as a win for you and to some extent for society as well.
So learn math, inbox zero, build a bunker. That's what I took from that. That's what I took from that.
There are many others, but that's a good summary.
That's not a bad start.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Excellent. So, James, your website is upgradable.org, upgradable.org. You've got all kinds of stuff here about self-improvement, meta growth, these concepts on becoming more agentic. It's a website I visit periodically and I really enjoy as well. Is there any other destination you would send people to?
But AIsafety.com, just so we can join in. Maybe your podcast, it's pretty great. One of the ones they can use to upgrade their cognition and their knowledge. We have a database of all the best sources of knowledge. It's extremely hard to figure this out because it's so personalized. But yeah, if you were trying to design your own perfect educational system, this is one of the things we could do with people. But yeah, you might be on there.
Oh, nice. Well, I hope we make it. I hope we make the cut. We appreciate it, James. Best of luck in all your many, 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 many endeavors. We really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.